Strawberry Spring by Stephen King, from the anthology Night Shift. Spring Heel Jack. I saw those two words in the paper this morning, and my God, how they take me back. All that was 8 years ago, almost to the day. Once, while it was going on, I saw myself on nationwide TV, the Walter Cronkite Report. Just a hurrying face in the general background behind the reporter, but my folks picked me out right away. They called long distance. My dad wanted my analysis of the situation. He was all bluff and hearty and man-to-man. My mother just wanted me to come home. But I didn't want to come home. I was enchanted. Enchanted by that dark and mist-blown strawberry spring, and by the shadow of violent death that walked through it on those nights 8 years ago. The shadow of Spring Heel Jack. In New England, they call it a strawberry spring. No one knows why. It's just a phrase the old-timers use. They say it happens once every 8 or 10 years. What happened at New Sharon Teachers College that particular strawberry spring, there may be a cycle for that too. But if anyone has figured it out, they've never said. At New Sharon, the strawberry spring began on March 16th, 1968. The coldest winter in 20 years broke on that day. It rained, and you could smell the sea 20 miles west of the beaches. The snow, which had been 35 inches deep in places, began to melt, and the campus walks ran with slush. The winter carnival snow sculptures, which had been kept sharp and clear-cut for 2 months by the sub-zero temperatures, at last began to sag and slouch. The caricature of Lyndon Johnson in front of the Tep fraternity house cried melted tears. The dove in front of Prashner Hall lost its frozen feathers, and its plywood skeleton showed sadly through in places. And when night came, the fog came with it, moving silent and white along the narrow college avenues and thoroughfares. The pines on the mall poked through it like counting fingers, and it drifted, slow as cigarette smoke, under the little bridge down by the Civil War cannons. It made things seem out of joint, strange, magical. The unwary traveler would step out of the juke-thumping, brightly lit confusion of the grinder, expecting the hard, clear starriness of winter to clutch him, and instead he would suddenly find himself in a silent, muffled world of white, drifting fog. The only sound his own footsteps and the soft drip of water from the ancient gutters. You half expected to see Gollum or Frodo and Sam go hurrying past, or to turn and see that the grinder was gone, vanished, replaced by a foggy panorama of moors and yew trees and perhaps a druid circle or a sparkling fairy ring. The jukebox played Love is Blue that year. It played Hey Jude endlessly, endlessly. It played Scarborough Fair. And at 10 minutes after 11 on that night, a junior named John Dancy on his way back to his dormitory began screaming into the fog, dropping books on and between the sprawled legs of the dead girl lying in a shadowy corner of the Animal Sciences parking lot, her throat cut from ear to ear, but her eyes open and almost seeming to sparkle as if she had just successfully pulled off the funniest joke of her young life. Dancy, an education major and a speech minor, screamed and screamed and screamed. The next day was overcast and sullen, and we went to classes with questions eager in our mouths. Who? Why? When do you think they'll get him? And always the final thrilled question. Did you know her? Did you know her? Yes, I had an art class with her. Yes, one of my roommate's friends dated her last term. Yes, she asked me for a light once in the grinder. She was at the next table. Yes. Yes, oh yes, We all knew her. Her name was Gail Kerman, pronounced Kerman, and she was an art major. She wore granny glasses and had a good figure. She was well liked, but her roommates had hated her. She had never gone out much, even though she was one of the most promiscuous girls on campus. She was ugly, but cute. She had been a vivacious girl who talked little and smiled seldom. She had been pregnant, and she had had leukemia. She was a lesbian who had been murdered by her boyfriend. It was strawberry spring, and on the morning of March 17th, we all knew Gail Kerman. Half a dozen state police cars crawled onto the campus, most of them parked in front of Judith Franklin Hall, where the Kerman girl had lived. On my way past there, to my 10 o'clock class, I was asked to show my student ID. I was clever. I showed him the one without the fangs. "Do you carry a knife?" the policeman asked cunningly. "Is it about Gail Kerman?" I asked, after I told him that the most lethal thing on my person was a rabbit's foot keychain. "What makes you ask?" he pounced. I was 5 minutes late to class. It was strawberry spring, and no one walked by themselves through the half-academical, half-fantastical campus that night. The fog had come again, smelling of the sea, quiet and deep. Around 9 o'clock, my roommate burst into our room, where I had been busting my brains on a Milton essay since 7. "They caught him," he said. "I heard it over at the grinder." "From who?" "I don't know, some guy. Her boyfriend did it. His name is Carl Amalara." I settled back, relieved and disappointed. With a name like that, it had to be true. A lethal and sordid little crime of passion. "Okay," I said. "That's good." He left the room to spread the news down the hall. I reread my Milton essay, couldn't figure out what I'd been trying to say, tore it up, and started again. It was in the papers the next day. There was an incongruously neat picture of Amalara, probably a high school graduation picture, and it showed a rather sad-looking boy with an olive complexion and dark eyes and pockmarks on his nose. The boy had not confessed yet, but the evidence against him was strong. He and Gail Kerman had argued a great deal in the last month or so, and had broken up the week before. Amalara's roomie said he had been despondent. In a footlocker under his bed, police had found a 7-inch hunting knife from L.L. Bean's and a picture of the girl that had apparently been cut up with a pair of shears. Beside Amalara's picture was one of Gail Kerman. It blurrily showed a dog, a peeling lawn flamingo, and a rather mousy blonde girl wearing spectacles. An uncomfortable smile had turned her lips up, and her eyes were squinted. One hand was on the dog's head. It had to be true. The fog came again that night, not on little cat's feet, but in an improper, silent sprawl. I walked that night. I had a headache, and I walked for air, smelling the wet, misty smell of the spring that was slowly wiping away the reluctant snow, leaving lifeless patches of last year's grass bare and uncovered like the head of a sighing old grandmother. For me, that was one of the most beautiful nights I can remember. The people I passed under the haloed streetlights were murmuring shadows, and all of them seemed to be lovers, walking with hands and eyes linked. The melting snow dripped and ran, and from every dark storm drain the sound of the sea drifted up, a dark winter sea now strongly ebbing. I walked until nearly midnight, until I was thoroughly mildewed, and I passed many shadows, heard many footfalls clicking dreamily off down the winding paths. Who is to say that one of those shadows was not the man or the thing that came to be known as Spring Heel Jack? Not I, for I passed many shadows, but in the fog I saw no faces.